So honored and blessed to welcome you tonight. We're gathering here for another 1 or 2 minutes and then we're going to get kicked off. I'm Pastor Chip and we want to welcome you to the first Park Rapids Fishing Expo, and we hope that you're going to have some fun and learn a lot while you're here. There are some excellent people to visit with, ask questions, learn, grow, share. We're going to have a good time tonight. Our hospitality people are around. They're wearing these buttons, and if you need direction to a restaurant, if you need something else, you just let them know. Also, we want to let you know that I'm just going to tell you I need a little help tonight because we got about 300 hot dogs in the kitchen there, and chips and other things, and pop over there. Help yourself. There's all of the refreshments are on a donation basis. Suggested donation, 50 cents, and that's 50 cents for a hot dog, 50 cents for pop, 50 cents for candy bars, for candy, 50 cents for chips. So if there's anything you want to snack on tonight, go back, help yourself, make a donation, and thank you very much. Also, want to let you know that we'll have concessions available until about 8 o'clock. And there'll be some opportunities. I'm glad that we are approaching the open water season. That's a wonderful thing. Also, I want to simply acknowledge the Hubbard County Coalition of Lake Associations wants to welcome you not only to the expo, but to the many beautiful lakes of Hubbard County, and acknowledging that the lakes and their care belong to all of us. Riverside Church acknowledges that God created all of the lakes and trees and said it was good, and then gave us humans responsibility to care for the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And we hope that you'll leave tonight being a better angler and someone who practices care and stewardship for our precious lakes. The DNR and Hubbard County are also part of the Expo team and are here to provide resources. Call on them and the fisheries folks, learn and get some expertise. And of course, the guides and media are here to teach you and share their expertise. And in this place tonight, there is a scary amount of fishing knowledge. So share it, learn, and grow. It's also a great time. We have a lot of guides on hand. It's a wonderful time if you're thinking about treating yourself or somebody else to a special day of fishing. Take advantage and line up one of these awesome guides, and you can learn at their tables. And with that, I want to introduce our MC for tonight. Kev Jackson is the host of Fishin' Paul Bunyan Country on K-Bun Radio. He's done it all in the radio business, but we love him for his outdoors interviews and his insight. He knows all the awesome fishermen that you're going to hear and see at this show, and so I invite you to welcome our MC Kev Jackson to the stage.
Well, thank you, Pastor Chip. And welcome to what is supposedly spring. I think I saw on Facebook they had a calendar and welcoming us to January 101st today. And that's what it feels like. But spring is coming and so is fishing. And, fishing, man versus fish has been a battle for a long time. Pastor Chip will tell you it started way back when Jonah was eaten by a big fish. We've tried to reverse it since then, more often than not. So we're going to learn how to do that tonight. One of the things that we need to do is remind you, first of all, that you have to have that table list. If the table list, I hope you all have that. If you haven't had it filled out yet, you need to have it stamped by at least 3 table hosts. Then you fill the name and phone number in. Make an evaluation of this on the back, drop it in the basket at the hospitality table, and you'll be eligible for the drawing for 3 $25 Visa gift cards at the end of the evening. And you do not need to be present to win that, by the way. Do want to just run down who the table hosts are if you haven't had a chance to see them all yet, all these people. Some great stuff tonight. We have Nicholas Macklem. He's an environmental specialist with the Hubbard County Environmental Services. He manages the county's AIS program and is an Expo co-sponsor. He can show you some AIS samples and learn about the watercraft inspection program and decontamination. The Hubbard County Coalition of Lake Associations is represented by several volunteers. They've got tables focused on things we can all do to help identify AIS, like hanging a zebra mussel settlement sample created by the Girl Scouts at your favorite public access. There's an AIS volunteer course they can help you with. They can also help you educate people on AAS and tournaments, public accesses, and resorts. And they've got Starry Trek coming up August 17th. Last year, they discovered Starry Stonewort on Wolf Lake on the Beltrami-Hubbard border. Nicole Kovar is here. She's the Minnesota DNR Northwest Regional AIS Specialist and an Expo co-sponsor. She's been on the forefront of Starry Stonewort discovery and management. She works with permitting, educating kids, plus serves internationally on AIS prevention. She's a person that whenever I call, it's not because of good news. It's to find out what else is going on. And I never call her and say, hey, we've had an AIS free week. So when I call her, it's always because something happened. So she quits returning my phone calls. We have Doug Kingsley and Mike Kelly with Minnesota DNR Fisheries out of the Park Rapids office. They know the scoop. Either that or they've been lying to me for the last 20-some years. And Riverside United Methodist Church with Pastor Chip Nielsen, Expo co-sponsor. They provided the venue and the refreshments, so let's hear it for them for being a great host tonight. In the lounge area, they've got a theme going on called Crappies for All Seasons and Artificial Lures to Catch All the Fish and More. So you might want to check that out. Gary Korsgarden's here. He's got a demonstration of setting a drag for use with light lines and a variety of rods, several other cool things as well. He's the ID person behind FM Walleyes Unlimited. He loves fishing, including crappies, of course. And we have Bob Stulich of DIY Lures. He's got hand-tied crappie lures and spinners. Jeff Mosner's table. You might want to check that out. Fly fishing for panfish. It's not just for trout, he says. He's an avid angler, enjoys fly fishing for all species. He's been making his own flies since he was 13 years old. He's been a watercraft inspector for Hubbard County as well. Jeremy Anderson from Jones Guide Services here as well. And we got some great people that are going to be up here talking tonight. Paul Nelson, who established the Bemidji Area Lakes Guide Service in 1982. He continues his guide service and writes fishing articles for the Bemidji Pioneer and other media outlets. He deeply values the art and science of fishing and how lake ecosystems can impact fishing. We have Jason Freed tonight, Minnesota Wildlife Guide. You can find him spending his time as a fishing guide in the Leech, Cass, Mille Lacs, and Brainerd area lakes. Outside of guiding, he's a high school social studies teacher at Brainerd High, as well as a varsity football coach. His passion in life, the 4 F's, faith, family, fishing, and football. We have Brock Rosedal from Max, Minnesota. He's one of the most recognized and respected anglers in North America. He's a multi-species angler, best known for ice fishing, finesse jigging, and fish location. He loves walleye and panfish. Bro is a great guy. I'd love to interview him because I can ask a question, then go for a jog, come back, ask another question, go have lunch, come back, ask another question. No, he's a great guy and really passionate, obviously. And another guy I've talked to many times, right in this area, Jason Durham, who grew up in Nevis, started guiding at age 15. And he's a great guy. He's also a kindergarten teacher in Nevis. So you'll hear from him today. He's also actively with the Hubbard County Coalition of Lake Associations here in Hubbard County. And our featured guest speaker to get things started tonight is Chip Leer, 2019 inductee into the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. So let's congratulate Chip for that. He's the TV and stage host of the world's most prestigious walleye tournament circuit, the National Walleye Tour. It's on over 130 million households worldwide. Wow, I thought I got a few people to listen. 130 million. As well as angler driving the popular digital fishing information, Fishing the Wild Side. He's a passionate and respected multi-species angler. He's been on the forefront of sport fishing techniques, tactics, and trends. He has worked with premier manufacturers and product development. He's explored cutting-edge ideas for fishing with the best anglers on open water and ice. Definitely an industry influencer. He has shaped the products we fish with and refined techniques to catch fish. Over his 30-plus year career, he's been the tournament director of the In Fisherman Professional Walleye Trail, FLW Walleye Tour TV host, co-host of In Fisherman Ice Guide TV, published in numerous regional and national publications, been on countless radio programs, including a fine one called Fishin' Paul Onion Country, and shared his knowledge and passion for fishing through his brand, Fishing the Wild Side. Please welcome Hall of Famer Chip Leer.
Thank you, Kevin. It's quite a humbling introduction, but thanks for having me. And I can't believe it because I don't know about the rest of you, but I was, see if I can get this here to come up. What I was thinking was going to happen here today was that I wasn't even sure when anyone was going to show up when I looked at the weather last night. We were all in the same game. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, by the way, just out of curiosity, anybody been out here, been fishing yet on open water? Anybody been fishing this week? Well, I know Heather Brosdahl caught a 30-incher this week, didn't you, Heather? Where's Heather? Right here. There she is. Give her a big round of applause. That's awesome. It's fun to see that. And thanks for having me. We're going to talk about a couple things that are really important to me here today. Obviously, I live and breathe fishing. And I also care deeply about the resources, and especially the ones in our backyard that we call home. That's what makes tonight really special, because we're getting together with a group of people that are passionate about not just where and how we fish, but what we're fishing on, and on the shores that we live on, such great waters that we want to take care of. So, we're going to talk a little bit about walleye fishing. I'm going to run you through some of the things, and what my goals are here for you tonight is to give you a little bit different look at what we love to talk about walleye fishing. And rewire your brain just a little bit about how you think about it and what you look at as effective. And I want to help you identify opportunities that are out there when you go fishing that you may end up missing. And I want to help you understand and recognize those areas so you can target them. Most likely, just little tiny things that and this is really what it comes down to. I'm going to get down to this in a little bit, but the reason that these guys are guides and making a living catching fish every single day is that they pay really good attention to little details, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those and what makes the difference in being able to catch fish every single day. Kevin gave me it was very nice, gave me a really nice introduction there and told you a little bit about myself. But most importantly, what gets me and what really makes me tick is I'm really fortunate that I get to travel around with a walleye tour called the Bass Pro Shops Cabela's National Walleye Tour. We travel at walleye fisheries from Lake Erie to Sakakawea, north, south, east, west, and over my career we've been everywhere from Arkansas to Montana to New York and up into Ontario. And what's really interesting about that is that when you hang around a lot of really good fishermen and there's a whole bunch of money on the line, whether you like tournament fishing or you don't like tournament fishing, the thing for me is that this is the cutting edge. This is what shapes the entire industry. This is where the little tiny things get tweaked that end up in your tackle box. You wonder how all that stuff happens. Most of this stuff happens when you are forced to put everything on edge and make things that much better over time. But when we think about walleye fishing, at least where I come from, everybody familiar about the history of structure fishing and Bill Binkelman? Raise your hand if you're aware of who Bill Binkelman is and studied any of his practices. It's a wonderful system. Nightcrawler Secrets was one of the first books that I ever read on walleye fishing. If you haven't read it, you definitely need to read it. But the intensity of what we grew up, and when I grew up learning how to walleye fish, whenever it got tougher, we got smaller. Whenever it got more difficult, everything got lighter. When the less the fish wanted to bite, the slower we went. And that was what we were taught. And it's a good system. It really does work. But it's not the only way to catch walleyes, and that's what we really want to talk about here tonight. And it really comes down to bottom bouncers. Does anybody out here fish with a bottom bouncer in the summer regularly? Where did they come from? They came from out in the reservoirs in the Dakotas, but they evolved and moved east through tournament fishing and putting people in systems that they weren't normally used. I mean, I can think about bottom bouncers showing up. I mean, the first time that I ever heard about a bottom bouncer, I was a fishing guy up on Lake Cabotogama in Rainy Lake, and the PWT had a championship there, and they went out there, and that first tournament back in the early 90s got won on a bottom bouncer, a single piece of line, and a hook and a leech. And it was a whole different mentality of fishing that I had never thought about. But it was utmost control and being able to control where you put your bait, regardless of how deep a water or whatever you were on. Plus, what's come of that, and we're going to get back to some of that, is bouncers aren't just for bouncing. But we're going to come back to that here in a little bit. The thing that I also want you to remember is, the things that we learned is that there's really nothing magic that's out there in terms of lures. Now I know in the back of the room we got one of the founders of North of Fish and Tackle, Dwayne Peterson, back here, and he'll be the first one to tell you that you can build the greatest lure in the world, but a fish has got to want to bite it. Most importantly, you got to make the fish want to bite it, and that's a real key. So there's really nothing magic that you can buy, regardless of all the advertising and the infomercials that we see on TV. You're not going to throw it in the water and suddenly a fish is just going to swim over and eat it, as much as everybody wants to tell you that. And I think about it because and there's little differences in the first thing I think about is a bass fishing and a Carolina rig. Does everybody know what a Carolina rig is for bass? Heavyweight, it's the same as a live bait rig system for walleyes. But it offers you to fish a bigger bait in a very finesse format. So you can get again, we go back to holding a heavy weight, getting it into exactly where you want by a presentation of a lure or a light hook that dangles something in front of a fish's face, giving yourself just a little bit more finesse opportunity. The other thing I wanted to mention here is one of the things that I've learned on the tournament trail from the anglers is their ability to understand what's happening on a body of water before you get to the body of water. What I want to talk about there is a spoon is not a spoon and a jig is not a jig. Because you walk into the bait shop and you go, how's fishing? Well, it's pretty good. Well, what are they biting on? They're biting on a jig. Oh, that's awesome. So you get in the boat, you head to the lake, and you go out there and you throw out a jig. Was it a round jig, fat jig, skinny jig, short shank jig, long shank jig, pyramid head jig? What type of jig was it? Most importantly, what were they doing with the jig? Was it in shallow water, deep water? Was it near weeds? Was it near rock? Did they let it sit on the bottom? Did they hop it? Did they drag it? Did they twitch it? Did they pop it? What did they do with the jig? So the one thing that really good anglers can do, better than most of the rest of us, is they've got the ability to interview anglers and pull out the details that matter. There's a reason that when you go to a team tournament, you interview each one of the team anglers individually, especially if they're doing well. Because one's going to tell you one thing, the other one's going to let out something else. Between the two of them, you might just get the combination of what made it all work. But it's all, a jig is not a jig, and a spoon is definitely not a spoon. So and we think about that from ice fishing. I mean, is it a fat spoon, a skinny spoon, a thin spoon? I mean, I can think of a million different examples of where things don't add up that way. Mostly, when we think, I want to talk about pressured walleyes here from the sense that we can live on a great lake and we fish bodies of water that that see a lot of baits. Especially myself. I live on Leech Lake, Capicona Bay. I can look out in front of my house. I've got a nice big reef that's out in front of me, and I watch boats go up and down it every single day. They'll plant themselves on a couple of little saddles out there and hold baits, overfish all day, every day, pretty much from opening day until the end of the season. Those fish get to see every single thing. Fish get to know that there's things that are dragging in front of them, and that is going to eventually push fish away from spots. They're going to move off spots. They're going to get angry. They may quit biting, and that's why new tackle matters. That part is not all the sales pitch. When you get something new in front of a fish's nose that it hasn't seen before, most likely you can get a reaction. And what are we really trying to do when we're fishing anyway? We're trying to get a reaction out of a fish. All we want to do is get it in front of his nose with an opportunity to do something with that bait that makes him want to open his mouth and inhale. It's pretty simple. It's not really that hard. But we got to get there and give him something new. And that really does become a difference maker. It also, we talk about here, this is also, when we talk about slow techniques, makes slow fishing that much harder. Or we can we fish faster, sometimes we can force fish to get reactions. So mostly, when it comes to fishing pressured fish, the one thing we're going to talk about here today is trying to find fish that other people aren't fishing. All these guys will tell you a story about being on a hot bite, being on the shoreline, catching fish somewhere, and anglers come along, and if they see a boat or a fish come over the gun of the boat, somebody's going to push right up to them and want to get right in there and right next to them because that's the only spot in the lake that's got fish, and I got to get into that spot because that's where I got to go. But if you think about it, where have you always had your best fishing? You've always had your best fishing when you were the one that found the fish. If you're the first one to the bite, and guys will tell you this story all the time, this is one of it's happened to all of us. Maybe a friend of yours calls and says, "Man, get over here. I'm over here on this point. They're biting. It's awesome. You gotta get there." So you pick everything up, you drive across the lake, you get over to that point, and you start fishing, and you either A, can't catch anything while you continue to watch your friend hoist fish over the side, or you finally do pluck off a couple, but you never, very rarely do you get the same type of fishing. Because for whatever reason, that bite is that person's bite. I mean, I can think of a story, one time crappie guiding with fairly reliable Woody, where Woody was much more reliable than Chip. On Rainy Lake one time, where on a crappie bite, where we literally, there was two rocks, a saddle between these two rocks. He was on one side of it, I was on another side of it, and we were throwing bobbers with little pieces of jig and plastics in catching crappies. And he's out fishing me 3-to-1, to the point where I've got him flipping his bait all the way over into my boat. I'm measuring the distance from the bobber down to the jig and making sure I got the same jig, I got the same plastic, I got the same everything. Can I get bit like he can? No, it's just not his. So find your own water is really, really important. And at the same time, there's lots of pressure in the spot, definitely get somewhere else and play detective like we talked about. Don't just ask what jig, what spinner, what rig, what crankbait. Find out how fast. Find out if they're jigging it, if they're popping it, if they're hopping it. Are they dragging it? Is it a long ways behind the boat? Is it a short ways behind the boat? Is it monofilament line? Is it a no-stretch line? All those things make a difference in your presentation. It all comes down to the details. And you got to ask yourself, if you're not finding fish, if you think where they're supposed to be, where did they go? Probably one of the biggest differences we've seen over the years in the world of fishing comes down to mapping. This whole mapping program is really good, and it's wonderful because it's helped us learn bodies of water and fish bodies of water effectively that much quicker than we ever have in the past. But it's also made things a little bit of a crutch on us as well. We rely so much on the map that we're not fishing enough by gut or what we're seeing on the actual sonar itself. But I think about times that mapping can get you right back to the exact same place. It's truly remarkable. I'm not going to go too far into mapping here tonight, but I do want to talk about this in terms of where fish call home. Bro was at this event. This is actually the ice fishing event that we did for Kraus Anderson on Lake Minnetonka a couple years ago. The X is where we started. It was the tournament headquarters right here. And if you look at on this end of the lake is what they cordoned off, and they're going to have this first time ever walleye ice fishing only contest on Lake Minnetonka, clear water. By the way, it's going to be during the day. Awesome. Let's make things really hard on everybody. So what happens here is if you looked at the map, it became glaringly obvious that there's an inflow of water here, and that this was a really key spot, and so was that little inside curve. Those were areas that, if you looked at the map and stared at it long enough, you're like, that's a pretty high percentage area to be able to catch fish. Tournament starts, everybody takes off, and everybody goes over there, and I'm actually, in this thing, I'm following Steve Panaz, but what happens is that over at that point, there are probably 2/3, maybe 80% of the field ended up exactly the same spot. So tournament starts, they go over there, and everybody, it's pre-electric drill, but everybody's they're all drilling holes because they're going to win the tournament, and they're running around, and they got ATVs, and drill. Sure enough, nobody's catching nothing. And what you watch happen is you go, where, those fish that should be there. So I watched Panaz, and Steve Panaz goes way out to this. I don't remember where you ended up, bro. But I know that Panaz went out here, because this is the point of the story is, Panaz went out here, fished on that second break, thinking that the fish just scooted out to the next point. But he got out there, fished for 15 minutes, didn't see anything on his graph at all, walked back, drilled holes, started marking fish, realizing the fish got pushed off, they're down in the basin, they hadn't quite got over to that next point yet. Boom, catches the biggest fish of the tournament. I think it had to be the biggest fish of the tournament, wasn't it?
Yeah, the biggest fish was caught like 2 minutes too late.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. But it was at sunset. But the point was, those fish were there and got pushed. There's a little better view. But they were all here. He went out here and ended up coming back, and all those fish did was slide down that point and start going around. So what to think about, instead of getting back to the same old spot, is to look at always ask yourself when you're out there and you're in a fishing situation, where did the fish go next? Or if they left here, where did they go? If they left here, how did they get there? Did they swim straight? Did they follow the structure? They have to end up somewhere, and it's just like deer. It's just like any other piece of game. Figure out where their trails are and try to cut them off at the pass, and you're going to end up putting some more fish in the boat. The other thing that we're going to talk about here is walleyes in the weeds. And myself as an angler, I think, and especially on the tournament trail, no matter where we've traveled, from east, north, south, west, doesn't matter, whatever body of water you go to, there's always seems to be a school of fish living in the weeds. And they're also probably the most overlooked group inside the weeds. Interestingly enough, some of the weeds, like shallow water, bulrushes and the cane, hold fish in 2-3 feet of water, even in bright sunny days, would tend to be exactly opposite of where you think walleyes should be living. But tournaments have been, and a lot of big checks have been cashed, fishing shallow inside those weeds. What's interesting about the weed fish is that on any body of water, there are different schools of walleyes. There'll be certain walleyes that will relate to structure that's offshore. There's certain walleyes that are going to relate to shallow water, certain water that's going to relate to deeper water. Those shallow water weed fish are in darn near every single system, and they're probably the least sought after fish in most systems. And it's a very targetable fish. We think about really a fun way to catch fish. If you learn how to pick apart weeds and walleyes, we're going to go there in a second. It can be super fun because it tends to get more reactionary bites, and you got to break up the mentality of how you think about fish. Does anybody out here fish bass besides walleyes? Who's caught walleyes bass fishing? Same hands. Amazing. And we're not disappointed. We're happy. We want to catch more walleyes, get back to those same weed beds, and adjust your presentation a little bit, and you're going to end up finding yourself a bunch of fish. Like in the summer over wheat, there's lots of different things you can throw, whether it's a rattle bait or whether it's a weedless type swim bait that looks a lot like a bass bait, but if it's weedless, you can run right through those weeds and get fish to move on it. We talked about bottom bouncers at the beginning. One of the neatest things about bottom bouncers, Especially if you've got like a rock runner here, where it's got a solid wire, an R-bend on it. This is probably one of the greatest weed deflectors ever used in the world of walleye fishing. Because what it does, you shorten your snell just a hair. What this will allow you to do is run along the deep weed edge, or even some of the shallow weeds, and since that your fishing line comes off the front here, comes through, weeds hit it, they roll off the bottom, keeps a nice, easy, open area for whatever spinner you've got tied on behind it. It can flutter directly behind there and come right through the weeds and not pick up any weeds on the actual hook, and you end up getting a bite out of the fish. Most of the time, as northern Minnesotans, as Minnesotans growing up, I was always taught that if I wanted to catch walleyes in the weeds, I had to fish super slow, I had to use small jigs, I had to flip it in there, or I had to use a float and a bobber and a leech. But you can do that in lots of different ways. You can troll things over the top. You can use jigs with a twister tail. You can use a rock runner bottom bouncer and a spinner. You can use all sorts of things to pull down, get through those weeds, and get fish to react. In other words, what we're doing here and what we're seeing in the world of walleye fishing, especially on bigger bodies of water, is forcing fish to react to baits. Go against our mentality of slowing down. When things get slow and we don't get bit, do we want to go slower or do we want to go faster? Faster is an equally good option, if not a better option, because of the fact you can cover more water, get to more places, and find fish that want to bite. Because if we find hungry fish, it makes for happy fishermen. The only thing about fishing that's bad is when you set things down, you can't find them, like I did right now. Got it. But they're all secondary spots. And we're talked about trying to get to one spot or getting to a popular spot and finding all the anglers and trying to find something secondary. And I think it's really important in the world of, we see it a lot in the world of ice fishing, where in ice fishing, I love ice fishing from the standpoint that something happens to our brain when the lakes lock up. And I'm really not sure what it is, but you see the best anglers that I know will get to a body of water. They no longer look at a map. They no longer do anything. They get to the axis, they drive down to the axis, they look out there, they see a group of houses, and they go, that must be where the fish are. And we drive out there because there's a road, and then we put the house down. Now, we're Minnesotans, so we're not going to get real close, but we're going to get kind of close. And then we're going to start fishing here, even though the person that's 6 houses over is actually on the real spot, the real good spot that's catching all the fish. The rest of us just happen to be kind of in the neighborhood taking up space. And we see that, we do that all the time, and I think that happens a lot in open water too. Well, you see a group of boats, they drive up, you get to the boats and you want to fish in the outside, you're not going to go right to the middle of the boats. My gosh, that would be just too rude. That's not very Scandinavian of us, is it? We can't do that. We're going to stay on the outside, even though the inside's got all the fish. So you gotta break it up a little bit. You got to figure out where you're going to be able to find fish. A couple of the things that I'm thinking about here is, one is a fishtail from my guide days on Lake of the Woods, and running around all day and struggling, and I remember this day distinctly about running around. I just couldn't catch fish, couldn't find a walleye to bite. We needed to have shorelines, we were getting hungry, couldn't find them, went looking for saugers, couldn't find those, just having an absolute awful guide day. Finally went around, went up, looked, and I'm graphing, fell off the side of a reef in the middle of the summer and down into 70 feet of water I go, finally mark a couple of hooks down there, drop a jig down, sure enough, there's walleyes in 70 feet of water. But I hadn't even looked hardly anything over 50 feet all morning long, because in my head, there's just no way that there's going to be a fish down there. So you got to break those rules. And the same thing goes for bass fishing. You can bass fish even on places like Rainy Lake. You can catch bass over incredibly deep water. Well, if there's bait out there that is swimming inside that water column, those walleyes will feed on that open water too, and they'll be out there. And we've seen that in a lot of systems. Anywhere that there's pelagic bait fish that are up inside that water column, those walleyes are going to suspend and be out over them, and they may find themselves suspended out over there. Or anybody been ice fishing and watching your graph and you see fish come in 10, 15, 20 feet off the bottom? I mean, not even remotely close to the bottom. So there could be fish in there too. We got to break ourselves from the rules. And I'm just like you. I mean, we all want the same thing. Family comes up, they come here for holiday. We always fish the same bodies of water. We fish in the same way, in the same places, because we caught fish there once. The best thing you can do on your own home body of water, and I'm a firm believer in this, is lose your GPS coordinates. Forget them. Start all over. Throw them all out. Some of the best walleye anglers in the world that I know don't save coordinates. I just don't know how to. See if I can get this to roll here. This is just some simple underwater footage from a day out ice fishing. I got a minnow on a macho minnow jig. But I want you to see the fish comes in, gives it a look, and then decided not to. Now that's kind of cool, but what really bothers you, did you see that one back there? See that one way in the back? Never even gave us a look. Didn't even come over to investigate what the heck we're doing. When it comes to walleyes, now this thing's going to come back here and it's going to keep looking at us. But I'm not sure we can convince it that it wants to bite. With every presentation that you're doing, there's three things that go through my mind. And whether I'm ice fishing, open water fishing, whether I'm jigging, rigging, pulling spinners, casting crankbaits, whatever I happen to be doing for walleyes, I go through the same scenario inside my head. One, you've got to attract that fish. You've got to get that fish's attention. That fish has got to know that you're in the neighborhood. You want to inspire that fish to give you a look. So that's called A. You've got to attract it. And then the second thing you do, and I call this AT&T. The second thing you want to do is tease that fish. In other words, if it comes over, especially in the world of ice fishing, where it comes up and takes a look at you, and it's just kind of sitting there looking at you, so you're kind of teasing it, and maybe you go into your little cat and mouse game and you raise the jig a little bit, the fish follows it up. Okay, I still got him. And then you can't quite get him to bite, so you may jiggle it a little bit, you may bounce it a little bit, then you'll raise the jig up a little bit higher. Fish follows you right up. Everybody with me? Anybody ever been in this scenario? Right? But what do we try to do? We've attracted that fish, got its attention, it turned and gave us a look, and now we're teasing it. Now we're playing a little game with it. The last thing that comes into effect is you've got to figure out how to get that fish to bite. You've got to trigger it to bite. And that is the hardest part about fishing. So whether it's open water or ice, you got to attract it, and you got to tease it, and then you got to trigger it into biting. And it doesn't work every single time. But if you keep mixing things up as you go along, as you are searching out the same water that you fished, and look at it with a fresh brain every time you hit the water, and work it out in a scenario where you start out the day, and your opening day is a great example of this. When we get out in the body of water to go fishing for the day, come up with a plan and mix it up. Don't say, you know what, it's opening day and I'm going to find them in 7 feet of water in rock on this point, or this point. You start out and you go, you know what, it's opening day and I've never been to this lake before. I'm going to fish some shallow water, then I'm going to fish some deep water. I'm going to go from some shoreline, then I may go out to something that's a little bit offshore. I'm going to fish some weeds, and then the next spot I'm going to try some rock. You know what? And I'm going to keep bouncing it around, mixing this all up. My presentation, I'm going to speed things up. Then I'm going to slow things down. I'm going to change presentations. I may have to change direction of what if I'm pulling something. Or the direction that my bait is coming across in front of a fish's nose. Check those things out and mix up all the colors. It really makes a big difference. But come up with a scenario. Because the biggest mistake I think that all of us make as anglers is that we keep wanting fish to bite the way that we want fish to bite. Doesn't work that way. Fish are going to bite the way fish want to bite. We're along for the ride. And when it comes to what you put in front of the fish, it makes a huge difference. Location, obviously, the lenders put together the FLP equals success, fish plus location and presentation, equals success. And you ask yourself that every single time you decide to switch lures. What am I chasing? What species of fish? Where am I fishing? What's the best presentation for this particular situation? Because you match all those things up, it really does make a big difference. And I think one of the best fishtails I got, one of the best lessons I ever had was this. Was one time I'm on Lake of the Woods. I'm guiding early in my guide career, and you know what? I'm doing pretty good. I'm catching fish every single day. Everybody's going home with limits. Resort owners are happy. The clients are happy. Everybody's happy. You know what we're doing? We're pulling hammered gold spinners, man. We're on Lake of the Woods pulling hammered gold spinners, and we're catching 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 fish a day. We're having great days. It's just, we're loving life. We're cooking shorelines. It's all grand. Get my new clients for the day. They come down. They get in my boat. What are we doing? We're pulling hammered gold spinners. You're pulling it, you're pulling it, you're pulling it. Let's go. Off we go. We're ready to go, and we get to the spot. One of my clients looks at me and goes, I don't fish hammered gold spinners. Fine, old man. Good luck. I'm the guy. I pull hammered gold spinners. He says, I pull these little red spinners. I'm like, no. By 11:30, we were all using the little red spinners. I had to borrow from him. Preconceived idea. No, I didn't get a nice tip, but it goes to the same thing with if you fish with live bait. Don't get so preconceived. Mix things up. Mix things up in your boat, and leave an open mind for every single day, because you never really know what you're gonna run into. In the springtime, I mean, when it comes to walleye fishing, these are simple basics for our neighborhood here, but weedy, shallow areas, 2 to 6 feet in depth. We got a lot of fish and a lot of food in those areas for those fish to call home. And the hard part about these areas is if there's a lot of boats there, I mean, these fish can get really spooky, and they will get pushed out by the number of boats. Think about that, especially early season when we have all these boats around. If this is an area that typically holds fish on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but on the weekends, there's all these people here, where did those fish get pushed to? Where did they go? Because they had to go somewhere, and they most likely didn't go too far. You know, the wind, cloud cover, all that stuff happens in that shallow water. And of course, just cast with the wind. Don't try to catch. You're going to cast this right.
Double A's.
Did I hit a button?
Maybe it could be batteries.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get you some batteries.
Yeah, we're all good. Just cast with the wind, and then basically, when you do concentrate on shallows, try to avoid the back of the bay or the really dark water. We fish jigs in that area. There's lots of different jigs, and I think your box should be full of all sorts of different shapes and sizes, because they all do different things. And if I can tell you, the one thing that I've learned over the years, especially when it comes to fishing, because I'm a tackle junkie. I love tackle. I love everything to do about it. I've got way more than I'll ever need. But it's much better to have a small assortment of tackle and know how to use it, than to have a huge tackle assortment and not know how to use any of it. So, and I especially taken that to heart in ice fishing, where I really got to limit everything I carry around. But all my jig boxes, everything's actually become smaller. As I've gotten older, it's gotten smaller. Because I've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, trying to mix things up. But when it comes to that, smaller jigs, whether you use artificial or live bait, I'm a big fan of where we're going in some of these, particularly artificial baits, especially the impregnated artificial baits, because we're getting reactions out of fish, and what all those artificial baits do, especially the impregnated ones, like an impulse, is that when a fish grabs onto it, it holds onto it just long enough for you to be able to set the hook. And that elongates, gives you a little better opportunity. And we're come a long ways. It really does make a big difference. The biggest thing to pay attention to is how you're working that jig, your jig stroke. Whether you're dragging it, hopping it, popping it, or twitching it, mixing that up, and then when you do get bit, or whoever else is in your boat, and you guys are mixing up your presentation, maybe one person is dragging it while another one is snapping it, pay attention to who's getting bit and who's not. Never be afraid to try bass tactics for walleyes because they work incredibly well. And I'm not going to go too long into all this in terms of lines and fishing types of fishing line, but understanding the difference in fishing line can make a big difference in your success. And matching, we talk about fish, location, presentation equaling success. Braided line, fluorocarbon lines, monofilament lines. Is there anybody out here that's fishing fluorocarbon all the time? Part of the time? Few people. Anybody that fishes like all I fish is braid now, that the braid has no stretch, I think I feel everything is great. A few hands out there. Who says monofilament is the best, I'll never change, it's awesome? We got a few people. The truth of it is, I mean, I think that, like when braided lines came out, I was in this bandwagon. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world because I could feel everything, I could feel every weed. I thought it was the end-all answer to everything. But in certain times it's not. It gets really cold. Sometimes, depending on the braid you're using, sometimes it can have a little bit of frost build up or ice build up on it. It floats. It can be a little bit cumbersome that way. It doesn't always cast so well, depending on the type of braid that you have. Monofilament, on the other hand, is awesome because it's got a little bit of stretch to it, so it's very forgiving when you get a big fish, or if you get snagged, you can feel it kind of got that elasticity to it. Tie knots really nice, and it's neutrally buoyant. Fluorocarbon is neat line too because it actually has got some weight to it, and it's incredibly effective every time you got to go straight up and down. If you're ever fishing straight up and down with a light jig, there's nothing like fluorocarbon because it will hang perfectly straight and eliminate all those little kinks inside your line. The less little kinks you have in your line, the more apt you are to actually feel a fish, look at it, feel it, or breathe on your jig. There's a line for ice fishing, which is a combination of monofilament and fluorocarbon called Fluorosilk that I absolutely adore. And it's essentially fluorocarbon coated monofilament line. So it ties knots really super easy, but it hangs straight and keeps you in touch with your jig. So there's lots of different lines out there. Most importantly, use what you are comfortable with and mix it up a little bit and play with it because there's different places for every single one of them. When it comes to crankbaits, we're going to rip on through this because I know we've got a little bit of time here. They really do well for weed walleyes. We talk about getting reactions out of fish. This is where I spent a lot of time in the last couple years, and I'm really having good success with getting crankbaits down into the weeds and ripping them through there, pausing them, and getting fish to come up and instinctively just whack a crankbait. What I do want to talk about when it comes to crankbaits, and this applies to jigs and specifically to spinners fishing, if you decide that you think you're on the right program, right? So we talked about attract, tease, and trigger. So maybe we're getting hit, but we're not getting eaten. The jig's out here. It's not down there. Maybe they're nipping at the bait and missing the back end of the crankbait, but they're not actually smacking the side of it. They're not getting the whole thing in their mouth. When you go to make a lure change, don't just change, between here and here. Change from here to here, or from here to here. Make big, dramatic changes in color. Color is a trigger. It's the last one. It's not very important. Action's more important than the color. But if you're going to change color, make big, dramatic changes in color and see how the fish react to them. And remember, this is a game, right? You're out here playing. You're having chess. You're having a little chess master with the fish today. And what's that fish going to do? Late spring, we move from the shallow waters. We come out a little bit. The weeds start to thicken up. And this is when it gets really fun because the the fish are starting to move from where they were right after spawn, starting to move out into summer. They're spreading out a little bit. And these are butterfly blades here, but this slow rotation, slow death combination spinner system, which we can get into, and I've got lots of examples here in the box if you want to talk about it when we're all done here today, is probably the most deadly system for walleye fishing in our part of the world, because it can be used on deep structure, edges of weeds, over the top of weeds, and most importantly, you can do it at an incredibly slow speed, like a quarter to a half a mile an hour, and really get fish to react. I use a lot of artificial crawlers, like an impulse crawler here, because when you get perch and panfish in there, they don't strip off your bait, and you're just going after reaction from those fish. Anyway, again, the same thing, pulling bottom bouncers through there, or this little deal here is a little rock and roll jig, and it's an adaptation from a bass fishing technique, which is basically a slow death hook on a swivel behind a lead head. And it does the same thing, a slow death presentation with a jig head that can be drug across the bottom and slowly spun, and as it's getting pulled along, those fish come by and just nip it right up. The same thing when we get into spring and summer. We talked about earlier, who's catching fish when they go bass fishing? Jig worms, and jig worming catches a ton of fish, especially in our bodies of water around here. And then lastly, as we start to wrap things up here, I want to just touch base on this. I work with a group called Minnesota Traditions, and maybe you've seen it. It's basically an education movement on aquatic invasive species through the Mississippi Headwaters Board, and it's pretty cool. And I encourage you to look them up on social media. Especially on Facebook or Twitter. They're quite active. It's an educational piece, and it really is a big reason of why I'm here talking to you today, is to drive home the fact of where and how lucky we really are. 11,000 lakes in the state of Minnesota, or thereabouts, depending on what number you actually want to utilize, and there's less than 7% of these infested with invasive species, which means we got this baby is long from over, and I get really tired of everybody telling me that the fight is over, because we've got a long ways to go. And why? I mean, of 50,000 non-native species in North America, 4,300 of those are considered invasive. There's 796 fish species listed on that list of non-natives, and 199 aquatic plants. And we're talking about less than 7% of our body of water, and we're up against all those. How many can you name? 2, 3, 4? Not very many. We got a long ways to go, and we got a lot of resources to protect. A couple things you may or may not know. I believe it's a 21-day dry period, so as people sell dock equipment or any type of swim rafts or things that go from lake to lake, it's a 21-day dry period. Same thing for an irrigation pump. If you have a neighbor or somebody that buys a pump from somebody else, it needs to be out of the water 21 days, so we don't have to worry about that. And what is really Minnesota Traditions about? It's about helping behavior change. And I bring this up because I'm old enough to remember the seatbelt law. I'm old enough to remember different fish harvesting laws and how we used to kill everything we catch. Now you're seeing people keep a couple of fish for a meal, but you're certainly not seeing anybody over harvest or wearing life jackets. This is something that we do on a regular basis now. That when I grew up, heck, we hardly wore a life jacket to go water skiing. We put on that stupid belt. Remember that thing? That was fun. And if you look at, we're watching in a short period of time, we've watched some great things happen. 90% of the boats that come through boat inspectors now, my understanding, are under compliance, and 98% of them don't have any weeds. That's huge improvement from where we were just a couple years ago, where like 40% of them had weeds on the trailer. So we're making great progress. If you want to know why you're here, you want to know what you can do, and I encourage you to grab a hold and do everything you can, is talk. Families, friends, neighbors, visitors, anybody you know, don't be afraid to talk. I know it's not the Scandinavian way, but we need to stand up and talk if we care about the resource. And I say that jokingly, but I'm really serious. Share information on social media. Make sure you get to Minnesota Traditions. Follow it on Facebook. Share that information, and then tell others about it. Because we have to speak up more. And in the same time, think really small. Because it doesn't take much to transfer any invasive species. Aqua shoes, fishing toys. How many people you know that live on White Bear Lake, grab their kids, get done playing on the water at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. On Saturday, they're up here in your lake playing with those kids. They put on the same shoes out of the same bag, grab the same water toys, throw them back in the lake. It's that little stuff that we're not thinking about. That's a really, really big deal. I'm going to pass on my Q&A because I know we've got a panel coming up, and I want to talk about one more thing if I can, which is called Min Fish. And is anybody familiar with Min Fish? I'm going to pass out some brochures here while we talk. But Min Fish is an organization that just got launched this spring by a group of stakeholders or people that care about the resource from inside the fishing industry and the boating industry in the state of Minnesota. And it's a neat movement. There's the fishing industry, boating industry, it's $4.2 billion in the state of Minnesota. From that, there's $270 million that come in state taxes out of that 4.2. My understanding is there's less than 50 cents on the dollar, or right about 50 cents on the dollar, that's actually getting reinvested back into our fisheries. So if you care about fishing, the purpose of Bin Fish is to make sure that our legislators are reinvesting back into the fisheries and make sure that they're looking out for future generations and they're supporting the youth organizations that are helping inspire the next generation of people to care about our resource. We want to educate them and fund them so they understand what it's all about. I'm part of the group, and if you look at the brochure, it's a pretty impressive group of people that have, and companies that have banded together to pull this, get this thing off the ground, and we certainly would appreciate your support. So please get to social media, or more importantly, get to the website. It doesn't cost anything to join. It's not a pitch. It's to have your voice heard in St. Paul. So all you got to do is get to the website, register your email, and your voice as an angler is going to get represented by Ron Shera, Al Linder, Ron Linder, Babe Winkleman, and a whole host of fishing industry people that really care about the resource. And that is it. I'm going to pass it over to Kev Jackson and take it from there. Thank you.
Jim Leer. Didn't even use a script that whole time. That's pretty impressive. The other thing that's impressive about Chip, if you've ever followed him on social media, he is an unabashed Gopher fan, Wild fan, Viking fan, and yet every time I see him, he smiles. So, that's pretty impressive. Pastor Chip, what do we got going on? We got
About a 5-minute break.
5-minute break?
Grab a hot dog, pop, chips, whatever, and